Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. So everybody, welcome. We are excited today. We are going to go on what is a magical tour of Morocco with travel writer and photographer Barbara Redding. And Barbara, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, excited. We've got your story up on blendradioandtv.com, so everyone can get that in the show notes. So just check the link out there. But going to Morocco, I know you've done a lot of travel writing, and this started out as like, oh, like a 3-day stay, and you're like, why am I going all the way there for 3 days? It takes 3 days to get there.
Right, right.
So you kind of extended your stay a little bit.
I did, and it was so worth it. I was with just a small group of travel writers. There were two others, and they had to turn around and go back home. And they were so jealous that I, had the opportunity to put together different additional trips that allowed me to stay for really 3 weeks. So
Wow.
it was great. I mean, you can always stay longer in places and learn more, but 3 weeks was a great amount of time. I felt real fortunate to be able to do that.
Have you been to Morocco before or anywhere in that region?
I have been to Egypt, but had
Okay, cool.
never been to Morocco. It had been on my list for a while. I had actually had a trip planned during COVID with a girlfriend of mine, and
Oh yeah.
COVID, they shut down the whole country, so we couldn't get in. That's why I had it on my mind, and was looking for an opportunity to go. And when the press trip came up to Tangiers to the Fairmont Hotel, I just jumped on it with both feet.
You're like, I'm in, I'm going. So 10 years. Now tell everybody about that region. I mean, like and the background behind me. So that is the Sahara Desert, right? The
Yes, it is,
iconic
and
Sahara Desert.
exactly, and it
Wow.
was that part of the trip was amazing. But I started in Tangier, which is a fascinating city in in its own. And during World War II, it was kind of the place where the adventurous type spies and people on the run ended up in Tangiers because it was kind of wide open. It was kind of managed by different European countries, and so it was considered wide open at the time. So it was kind of a wild place. And so today, it still has some of the remnants of that. And I stayed in what used to be or what was intended to be a palace built by an advisor to the Sultan. But the politics
Ooh.
changed, and he was never able to finish it. And it sat there for almost 100 years before the Fairmont Company decided to make it into a five-star hotel. And it really is quite spectacular.
It really quite lavish. When I look at it, it's kind of things are lavish and then at the same time an artistic and attention to detail. It seems to be with everything, even the tea glasses in your photography. I was like, we always drink tea in cups and saucers here. Well, today I have a mug. So sorry. Oh, you can't even see it, but I have a mug of tea. But you need it if you do a lot of podcasting. But it's kind of interesting to look at all the attention to detail and the colors, and then you'll go to a market which we'll go, well, why isn't everything bagged and plasticky like we have, right? So it's kind of this opposite of experiences, it seems.
Yeah, it's a very colorful place, and really throughout the whole country. I mean, some places more so. And I mean, you have the backdrop of the Sahara Desert behind you, but it's really, that's maybe in terms of the color, that's a pretty uniform color. But everywhere else, you've got bright reds and blues and greens, and it's just a really dynamic place in terms of the colors that they use in everything from the clothing to the teacups to the clothes that people wear. It's just a very, very colorful place, which is what, I think one of the things that makes it so interesting. In Tangiers, like all the buildings are actually painted white. Its nickname is the White City. But when you go to the markets, there are colorful scarves, and everything is kind of so dynamic, set against that white background.
Yeah, but the desert is like that,
Hmm.
about the desert areas are like that. And then it's kind of interesting because when you have those kind of tones, then you do want to liven it up a little bit with different colors. So it's kind of
Hmm.
interesting, but a lot of it is also even the food and the spices have that color,
Hmm.
and
Right.
I think that and the tea, you had the tea. You did the tea. I'm
Yes.
jealous about the tea. I wanted to go to Morocco specifically for the markets and the tea.
Hmm.
100%.
Well,
I know there's camel rides and there's other places to stay, and there's so much, but I want to go there for that. I mean, I think a
mhm.
lot of people think of that first, right? I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I think the tea is one of the things that people think about, and it is. I mean, Morocco is known for that. I don't think I really realized how how much tea people drank, but everywhere we went, that there was always tea, and that was the first thing that they came up and asked you if you wanted it sweetened or if you wanted it unsweetened. And it, part of the whole, I think the way that Moroccans welcome people to their homes or their restaurants is they serve tea. And
Mm,
and I found that to be a very charming
mm,
aspect of Morocco, and particularly of the Moroccan people.
mm. And so for you moving forward on this journey, there's the teas. So it's like as soon as you like land, you have to start learning this culture immediately, right? And that's part of being a travel journalist is okay, now there's tea. Is there going to be tea in the next place? Or is it the whole area? You know what I mean? So you have to start picking
Right.
up those customs. I mean, were you even worried like, what about the language and getting around? And did I pack the right clothes because it snowed in the Atlas Mountains while you were there? So I mean, the acclimation part of this, what was that like? Because even the markets, I grew up in Africa, and in the markets there, like, dude, seriously, um, you better be able to handle everybody pressed against your body.
Yes, I think that's
If you're
definitely.
a loner and need company, go to a market.
Yes, there's so much to see and smell and experience in the
Mm,
markets of Morocco. That's for sure. In terms of preparation, I went in January, which is not the ideal time. I think generally in Morocco, you probably want to avoid the winter and the summer because it can be very hot. But on the one hand, being there in January, I did need, kind of a warm coat and maybe more clothes than you would need in the summer. But it was a wonderful time to go because there were so few other tourists. And
mm,
so it was really kind of, a unique opportunity to be in places. I mean, there were still a lot of people in Marrakesh for sure, and in Fez in the markets, but not the kind of pressed together that you see in, the more busier times of year. But
mm,
I think you just kind of, I looked at the temperatures, I dressed for that. I think it is a more conservative country than a lot of places. And so
right.
it's not the place that you're going to, parade around in, sleeveless tops and things like that. And as I said, it was cold. So I didn't even, that wasn't even tempting. But it is a conservative country. And a lot of people, particularly once we got into the mountains and the rural areas, I mean, they're wearing the traditional dress, men and women, some women covering their heads and faces, not all of them, but it is an Arab Muslim country, and so they are conservative. One of the reasons that you realize is that a lot of people drink tea is that they are not alcohol is not something that is consumed by
Right.
many in the Muslim culture. And so tea tea is the drink of choice in the evening for
But
breakfast.
they smoke, right? Too? Don't they smoke?
Well, I mean, like everybody smokes. I mean, you see people smoking, but it's not, I don't remember it being, overwhelming. I mean, they do have, I guess you're talking about the hookah bars
Hmm.
where you can go in and do that. Yes. I mean, that's available, but it didn't seem that prevalent, at
Oh,
least
I like the
when
tea.
where I was.
So the tea was a main thing. So when you were
Yes.
there, I mean, so what about for travelers? Is like that's it. If you like your wine at night, get over it, or can you get wine?
Well, most of the restaurants that house Western tourists do have wine and beer, and some, some hard liquor too. It's not, and one of the things I was surprised to learn that actually in Morocco, there are some vineyards in Morocco and some wineries. Apparently they were left over from, well, that I guess when the Romans were there, many in the first century, they planted vineyards. And then of course the French were very involved in Morocco over the years. And of course, the French like their wine, and so they planted vineyards as well. So it's not a perfect climate for wine growing, but I was pleasantly surprised by some of the wines that we had with our meals. So if you walk into a restaurant, maybe mostly serving locals, you may not have access to wine. But if you're staying in a Western hotel, or as with the group, you in most cases be able to have a drink.
Well, and it being a Muslim country, you also want to be very respectful, and it's a very interesting time for us, even covering Muslim content. And to me, I just want to just put a thing out there for folks to remember each person is individual, and maybe talk to people individually and not place anything on anything. Like, you know what I mean? It's a very hard thing when you, as a traveler, travel writer, when you go to places and you see what's going on in the world, there is a compassion that comes with it. And so as we go now with what's happening in Israel and everything, do you feel a compassion? I'm not saying to pick sides or anything, because that's not at all what I mean, but there's a bigger scope when you travel, and a bigger compassion that comes with it when you travel, of understanding that, to embrace differences versus the other side.
Yes, and I think that Morocco as a country is one of those places that has a reputation for being very accepting of people of all religions and races, because of it's been a transit point. Europeans came. It's very close to Spain, so a lot of people came over from Spain and from France. So you have a lot of Europeans, and then you also have the original Berbers who were there
Right. Oh, yeah.
before basically the what they talk about, the Arabs who came from the east and settled in Morocco as well. So it has a big mix of religions and people, and a strong history of being very tolerant. And I thought that was one of the more interesting things about Morocco, that it is 95% Muslim, but it's just, everybody that we talk to is very accepting, and it does not seem to be a country that was there was a lot of tension around that. Now, of course, I was there in January. Things have changed a bit given what's going on in other parts of the Middle East, as we know right now. But I found Morocco to be an incredibly welcoming and accepting place, and the people as well.
Yeah. I have friends from Morocco, and I mean, they know how to cook. Number one, their cooking is
They do.
fantastic. And it's just fantastic. And they know how to take one lemon and do things with a lemon that we'd never even, like, what, I mean, it's amazing what they can do in preserving food and spicing and herbs. I mean, it's amazing. So food, because all the colors of those spices, the lemons, the mint tea, like, come on, what was some of the highlights for you food wise?
Oh, I love the food of Morocco. I mean, I've always
Pomegranates. Ooh, sorry, I had to bring that up too.
but I love eggplant. That became one of my favorite things. And they have a lot of eggplant in Morocco, and so they cook it in all different ways. So it's really one of my favorites. And olives everywhere.
Bring
Just,
them.
I loved it. Stuffed, unstuffed, black, green, all different kinds of colors. You went into the market and it was just, the colors were just amazing. But one of the most interesting things that we did on our trip, and I think others do on tours, is we had dinner with the family when we were in Fez. And
Oh,
so, the I think the woman of the household had some help. She didn't do all the cooking, and I think her husband helped too. But we just had an amazing home cooked meal in
oh,
the traditional pot that they use in Morocco with the tent. Now I'm blanking on the name, but a
like a
tagine.
tagine. Yeah, tagine.
Yes,
Yes.
and so, they brought it out to the table, and it was this amazing chicken dish with lemon and olives that was
Mm.
just, oh, it was so good. And then one of the things, they're very big on vegetables. And so, they had carrots, about 5 or 6 different vegetable dishes,
I
some
just
with
want to
honey.
say, but anybody watching this is looking at the desert behind me going, yeah, right. Carrots, eggplant growing out there, maybe chicken somewhere, somehow. But I just want to say that there's different regions of Morocco.
Yes, yes, and I was gonna say the coastal regions, I mean, Morocco is a big farming country too. When you get closer to outside the mountains and the desert, big farms. When we were on the bus driving through parts of Morocco, I was kind of amazed at the wheat fields and various crops. Of course, they have lots of olive trees, but it's a very verdant country in certain places. Now, the desert,
Mm.
not so much, but
But
I
you'll get
just
Majul dates, maybe. As far as
and
I know,
dates.
they come
Oh,
from there.
dates are everywhere
Yeah.
too. I mean, I really enjoyed the cuisine from the main courses to the fruits, the vegetables. They had some actually quite good desserts as well. So
Ooh.
anybody who I think likes different types of foods and is open to trying new things, I think Morocco is just a wonderful place to expand your taste buds.
Does it kind of go also towards the Mediterranean style of cuisine with it being so close to Spain? I mean, you brought up that point in your article that I think we forget about, that it's just not that far from, Spain with the Rock of Gibraltar. Now, I want to go there because of the monkeys and
Right.
because
Yes.
of the a Bob Dylan song, but that's a whole other story. I'll travel just for Bob Dylan songs because I'm
Uh-huh.
weird. But I do I'll go just for the song just so I can play it there. But you really bring it back home to us that like all of that is pretty close and we forget that. You
It
think
is.
like
And so you can
Morocco's
look
in this
at
far distant, but it's not. And I lived in South Africa and Kenya, so it actually was in the same continent, but you always kind of, oh, it's way up there, but it really wasn't that far from Kenya. Like, well, for me now, but
right. Yeah. No, it's very close to Europe. And so there's a lot of European influences that you find there. Now, I also, after being in Morocco, went to Spain a couple months later, and it's
oh
amazing
wow.
similarities there are in the culture in Spain and in Morocco, because the Spanish were in Morocco for a while, and of course, the Moors that lived in
Hmm.
Spain until they were um, basically kicked out about the 12th century. So there's a lot of similar cultural
Mm.
things in both countries. Very interesting to kind of go between one and the other, and you can
Hmm.
really get a sense of
That's
you know
cool.
food and culture and
Mm.
architecture and everything.
Now, so you like the food, obviously, right? Now, is there tea beyond the mint tea, or is it always the mint tea?
Um, that's primarily what it is called. You
Okay.
can get different kinds of tea. I mean, when I was staying at the Fairmount, they brought out a basket of tea, and so you had all kinds of choices. But if you go into kind of a typical local restaurant, you're going to get the actual leaves of the tea, in cups of hot water. So
That's awesome.
it's whatever is growing in that region. And they talk about it as being, combining with the mint leaves. But as I said, I don't know that it's always mint tea everywhere, but it's probably the most prevalent.
It's very healthy.
Oh, it
It's good
is.
for you.
I
It's good for your digestion. It's good for your body, and it's a perk up. It's a
right.
little,
And uh-huh. I ended up bringing some back for sure.
I know, because once you have that taste, it's like, okay, am I having wine or tea? Well, I don't know.
Right.
I
You
ooh,
missed
that
it.
would
I
be hard.
missed it. Yeah,
You
I've missed the food too. I mean, I've had some, tried some Moroccan dishes at home with, mixed success, but really did fall in love with the food for sure.
Well, you have a photo of the juicers in the market with all these pomegranates, and us in the Western culture look at pomegranates and go, "Oh, hell no. We had to take all those seeds out. What you talking about, Willis? Like we ain't doing all that work." I mean, yet over there, they're just like, "Here, you know, we know how to use our pomegranates and they're so healthy." So it seems that their food is pretty much on the healthy side in a lot of ways with fruits and teas and that kind of thing. That eggplant, like you're saying,
Uh-huh.
there's a healthy, good. I mean, I don't know if they're in a blue zone or not, but it feels like they could be.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either, but I would say yes, very, Mediterranean, and obviously
Mhm.
they are much of the country is on the Mediterranean, and the climate is similar to France and Spain and other countries along.
Hmm.
So they have a lot of they grow a lot of the same foods and fix them in different ways, but similar ways. So I think I consider their cuisine quite healthy.
Mm. So now let's talk about your lodgings because you did like quite a few days there. Like
Hmm.
you went over a week or how many weeks? How
Well,
long
we're
were
up
you
there
there?
3 weeks. three
That's what
weeks.
I thought. 3 weeks. I don't have all my notes in front of me, but 3 weeks. That's what I thought. I was like, oh, she went from 3 days to 3 weeks. She expanded. She worked it. She's like, I'm going. What were the lodgings like for you?
Well, as I said, I started out in Fairmont, so that was kind of my
La-di-da.
luxury accommodation. So it was beautiful. I had my own like balcony overlooking, the city, and
Oh, nice.
it's just a gorgeous 5-star hotel. There's no doubt about it. And they had several different restaurants. I mean, it was, and they had their own spa and gym. I mean, it was a deluxe accommodation. Now, so I spent, I guess, 4 nights there, 3 days. And then from there, I arranged my own trip because I had really wanted to see Chef Showen, which is known as the Blue City. All of the walls are painted various shades of blue.
Oh,
For
wow.
the reasons for that are, you know, people disagree on exactly the reasons why it's so blue, but I was fascinated to go there. And so arranged my own transportation and found what they call a riad. And a riad is kind of an older traditional home with a courtyard in the middle. And it's, they're popular throughout Morocco and some other Middle Eastern countries. And often they have what's called a hammam, which is where you can get kind of a special bath. And so I was excited to try a hammam because that was something I had never been. I've had massages, I've had scrubs, I've had various kind of spa treatments, but hammams are um, are different. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to stay in the Riad. But the Riad was quite nice too. I mean, nice hotel rooms. But in the middle was kind of a courtyard and a swimming pool, and then they had like what we would describe as a spa area. But so I signed up for the hammam, which is a form of a steam bath, and then
Hmm.
you have an attendant that scrubs you down from head to
Wow.
toe with like it's not a Brillo pad, but um with it's a very kind of cleansing process involving a couple different things like the steam. You get cold water, you get hot water, and it's a very rejuvenating process. And that's one of the things that riads often
They're
have.
opening your pores. They're taking all your junk
Yes,
out. They're cleaning
exactly.
it out. Yeah,
a
they're like,
cleansing
rub it
a
out.
cleansing experience. And in Morocco, a lot of places even today do not have their own baths and running water, and so there are public hammams where people go and actually scrub each other. Now I wasn't quite ready for that. I thought I would prefer a private
Yeah.
hammam experience, and so
Yeah.
that's what I signed up for the Riyadh. But it was a beautiful place, and really loved everything about it, from the food there to the experience. And then from there, I joined the Gate One tour. And so we were mostly staying in kind of Western style hotels wherever we went. But when we went to the desert, we
Mm,
stayed in a really interesting kind of an African style. You being having grown up in Africa, might kind of recognize it, and just um, beams, and it was just in the desert. I mean, you really felt like you were kind of out there, and the architecture was like a kind of a sand castle,
I love
and
it.
like an oasis in the middle. I mean, it was probably most of the places where you do stop once you get to the desert are or were oases, because they were the only places that had water, and that's where people ended up. Now these days, obviously, there are Western style buildings, and you have better access to water and other things, but it really was quite a one of the most exotic places that we
Mm,
stayed. I would have loved to have done a tent stay. A lot of trips to Morocco
hmm.
do include sleeping in the desert, but because I was here in January, that wasn't one of the options.
Sounds
Plus,
a
it was
little cold. I was gonna
yeah,
say, because I know desert nights get chilly, yeah, and you're in Texas, you're not quite in the desert, but you're in that hillside area where it can get
right.
cold at night. It really can. And yeah, I agree with you, but I love the tent styles, going out there, but it also gets windy. That's part of the
Uh-huh.
problem with the desert is the wind. It's not
Yes,
necessarily even the heat. It's the wind, going
exactly.
out. Yeah,
And
so
what in looking at the landscape behind you, which is one of my pictures, I mean, you think that's what the wind did to the
yeah,
sand. It sculpts it into these amazing,
it's
you know,
beautiful. And they've
it
got
is.
little lizards that go in and out and do all kinds of things inside. Yeah, there's all
Uh-huh.
kinds of critters in there, which I don't want to freak people out on, but I think it's cool. But going out, you went on camel. So was that your first camel ride, or have you been
I
on
had
camels
actually
before?
ridden a camel in Egypt, but it had been a few years ago. And the camels of Egypt are much bigger, taller than
Oh, that's
actually.
interesting.
I know. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
either. We did learn about the various sizes of the camels and why. But so our camels were shorter, but that was still a fascinating experience. We it was part of the experience that we got into, like basically sand buggies, and then rode out into the desert and to this camel ranch, I guess you would call it, and that's where we met up with kind of our camel handlers, and got on the camels, and then rode up to into the landscape that's behind you, and for the sunset.
Mm.
So
Well, that's
that
the
was
color. You got the colors, which was like, because it could be, your time of day is important for the desert.
uh-huh.
Seriously,
Right. So
you
they
know.
timed it so that we would be kind of up on one of the sand dunes in time to watch the sunset, which was quite spectacular. But we did start out being kind of hot, and
Wow.
then by the time we got up there in the sunset, it was really cold, because in some ways you were kind of like, wow, I want to spend more time in the desert. Once the sun went down in January, it is really cold. So
You're like,
uh,
I want to go back to my Western lodgings now.
right. Well, that was kind of the way it turned out. So as I said, by the time it was time to return, I think we were as happy as the camels to go back to the camel ranch and
Camels
get
are
in
like,
the
I want my food now. That's enough. I want to ask about the tips for people planning a trip to Morocco. Because you worked on your own thing. I know as travel writers, we work with a lot of CVBs, destinations,
uh-huh.
and work on itineraries with them, but it's different for those going out on their own. Would you say go with an excursion company, travel guides, or go for it on your own? If it's, I mean, especially if anyone if this is your first time traveling overseas, you may want to go with an excursion company, maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Morocco is, because of the language issues. I mean, a lot of people do speak English, but it's I think particularly your first time, I would definitely recommend a tour guide. It's also getting from place to place can be complicated. I did ride the train on my own, but I remember trying to get my ticket out of the booth, and I finally just gave up and stood in line, which was kind of long, to actually talk to somebody who I thought would speak English, who could help me make sure that I got on the right train. So it
Yeah.
turns out I did, and it was all fine. I think I could go back and be just fine on my own, but it's a little more, well, I would say more than a little more comfortable to have someone else taking care of the arrangements. Morocco, in some ways, is very modern. In other ways, it is not. And so it's also, a country that where people are doing well and people are not doing so well. And so there are lots of street vendors. I did not find them to be harassing, but I think some people do. And
Mm.
particularly, I think maybe younger women in particular may have, be more likely to be hassled in the markets where there's a lot of activity going on.
So it's
I
also
did
about our attitude, how we go in.
Right. And I mean, I didn't, I was never worried or felt unsafe. Um, but I think that it's a matter of comfort, and that probably the first time being with a group and having a guide making, some of the decisions about where to stay and what to do when and all of those kinds of things would just make it easier. I
I
think
think
if
also
I
for single women traveling, that's a good point of, so many people retire now and they're like, okay, we're going to hit our bucket list. And if you didn't have time to travel internationally outside of major city, easy air flight in and out kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Mm,
You could have traveled for business and hit a few highlights, but not really traveled. You know what I mean? For the travel
uh-huh,
experience. I
uh-huh,
think sometimes getting the guides can help you, and once you to get your travel feet going, it's like a
right,
it's like almost having a new job, a new
mhm,
career,
right,
because travel is, it is tiring. And I'm not discouraging people. I'm just saying you want to have the best experience. I think the first few times you go internationally, I think go with a group or go with
mhm,
a tour guide help or somebody to guide you through the process so that you, especially if you're going to places like Morocco, even Egypt, and Egypt, I'm sure is not that remote, but it's, I just think you should have some help along the way for your first few times until you get your sea legs, your travel legs. That's all.
yeah, and I think that Morocco is pretty exotic in
And it
comparison
doesn't matter what
to.
age, by the way. I was talking about people retiring. They've got a lot more experience, but I mean the first time, and especially because we have so many women travelers now that are going solo too,
Mhm. Right.
which we
And
forget to talk
I
about.
was solo in a group. So
Yeah.
I did was totally solo when I went to Chef Showen. But the other times I was traveling with other people that, we could share the experience with, as well as,
Hmm.
just get additional information.
Hmm.
And I think our guide, for example, on the Gate One tour, grew up in Morocco. He had studied in Paris, a very interesting man who gave us a lot more insight into the country and its history than maybe we would have gotten on our own, for example. So I think that a good tour guide can really enhance your experience, in a place where that's, when Morocco is pretty exotic for a lot of American travelers. So,
I
so
agree.
it's not, we don't get a lot of Moroccan history in our history books.
No.
So I think Mohammed was a wonderful resource for us to learn more about Morocco.
And you're hearing it from a local, you know,
Mhm,
and who knows, little things that you're not going to always get on Google. Like Google's good, but like not for everything. I'm just
mhm,
saying. There's nothing like the in-person real experience. Barbara, for you, I want to kind of touch on your travel writing because I know you've traveled the world, right? But you started out in actual journalism. So as a travel writer, travel journalist, there is a difference between a travel writer blogger versus a journalist kind of thing, but yet I think they're all connected. But a
mhm,
journalist, having that journalistic background kind of makes you get to the heart of the story quicker. Like you're not allowed to have all these extra frills. You know what I mean? Just the facts, ma'am. You know.
Right. Yes, that was my background is just the facts, ma'am. But I do find that there is a lot more freedom in travel
Hmm.
writing to, um, to just talk about more about what you're seeing. Now, again, as traditional journalists and travel writers, we always have a space limit. You can't tell everything you did, so you have to make decisions about and prioritize the information that you have so that you're presenting it in a way that's interesting and educating, to your readers. So I do think that my background probably imposes a bit of more discipline than maybe somebody who hasn't had to write on deadline, who hasn't had to write
Hmm.
for about a specific to fit a specific hole in a newspaper or
Hmm.
magazine, for example. But I think in some ways travel writing is a little more free. You're
Yeah.
freer to write about the people and the place.
But you weren't, but travel writing traditionally was more journalistic, like don't put your feelings in. We don't want to know that you lost your scarf in this town or whatever. And yet when you talk to people about travel, they want to hear they want the dirty stories. They want to know what went wrong. Have you found that too? People just actually want to know, like, well, we broke down and this really sucked. We didn't get to go to the bathroom for 10 hours because we were broke down here. They actually want those stories. It's
Right.
weird, isn't it? It's kind of that balance.
It is, and it's funny being, having been in those situations too. I had an amazing trip to Europe. We ended up then going flying from Greece to Cairo and decided to go from there. This was a few years ago, and went from there to Israel, and we ended up in a taxi cab going across the Sinai, and when I was with one of my sisters, and
Wow.
that was the most. I mean, Europe and everything else we did was pretty normal, but that taxi ride across the Sinai is something I will never forget, and it's one of my favorite travel stories to share with people because it's just, you go to Paris and everything is fine, but it's those, as you said, the things
Adventures.
that happen when you're
And it's
that
not
can be the
funny
most.
when you're going through it. It's not funny. There's fear,
No.
there's interesting language on all levels. And you get out of it, but that's the cocktail story, isn't it? It's
It,
like,
it is. That's what there were times when I thought we would be ending up spending the night in the desert and maybe no one would
mhm.
ever see us again. But that wasn't how the story ended. But it's a great travel tale. So I think you enjoy and remember those kinds of experiences more
In
than.
cocktail parties in South Africa, they would call all of us travelers wenwees because you'd have your drink in hand going, well, when we were here and when we did this, you know what I mean? That's what this nickname of wenwee came
Mhm.
up above. I was a kid at that point, not drinking the cocktails, but I would refill the cocktails for the adults and had my own cocktail. But anyway, that's what happened in those cultures, but in times. But I, you know, I find it fascinating going from journalism to travel writing. How many countries do you think you've been to now?
I was afraid you were going to ask that, and I was going to add it up, but I
Well, just
haven't.
ballpark. Well, I
Ballpark.
love that you don't add it up either because it's almost like I mean, we travel full time doing all the parks, and I think we did 1,500 in COVID. Don't ask me now because eventually it's like all these little badges, which I think are great. But I think when you get to just you're really living it, you're really living it. It's like
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, yeah. I,
the
I would say I'm probably in the 30 to 40
that's
country.
amazing though. I mean, how many people get to five?
Mm-hmm.
And we want people to go beyond that because it's truly living. So beyond that fear zone of crazy taxi rides and things like that, right? And
Uh-huh.
we've gone full circle on that. Oh, that's pretty good. Um,
Right. Yeah, I feel very fortunate to have gotten to travel to as many countries as I have, and hopefully I've got quite a few more ahead of me.
what is
Always.
it that keeps you going with it? What is it? The adventure? Is there? The
You know,
hotels? Is it the what is it? The camel rides that gets you going? What is it?
it's always something different. I think that's, it's everywhere I've been, there's always something different. I remember going to Seoul, South Korea. That was totally a place that I had, the experience was totally unique. And so it's kind of, I think that wherever you go, there is always something different about that location. And
Right.
that's what drives you to the next place. Okay, I've been to China, but I haven't been to New Zealand. That's still on my list. I've been to Australia, but not New Zealand. But there are things that are unique to New Zealand that you can't see in Australia. So you want
Every place,
to.
yeah, every place is different. Every country, every neighborhood, even in
Mhm.
America, is different. And there's
Right.
always a story.
Yes, there's definitely always a story, and many times there's more stories than you can tell.
God, that's the problem. I have a hard time. Just before recording this with you, I was talking to our friend Victoria Chick, and she's an artist, and we were doing a thing on cemeteries. And
Uh-huh.
I just was like, every gravestone is a rabbit hole for me. And that sounds terrible, but it is because it's someone's life. And
Hmm.
now I want to know who this is. Now I'm going to have to do research. Now here comes the Google. Here's the find a grave. And next thing I know, I've totally forgotten that I was supposed to do something else on a deadline because I want to know. Like,
Right.
I want to know. And that is the problem we have as
Uh-huh.
travelers and writers is seeking and sharing these stories and editing them. And so I love that you have the journalism background to help you on this. Everyone, you can go to barbararedding.com to keep up with Barbara's adventures. She's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, also writes for Travel Weekly and travelweekly.com. Check that out. Also, the Food Wine Travel magazine for the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association, who we call IFTWA. You can go to
Mhm.
ifwtwa.org. And I mean, I've known your name for a long time, and I think it's really watching all the social media things on IFTWA, hashtag IFWTWA. And I've always seen Barbara Redding, and I'm like, dang, she gets around. You go, girl. So how long have you actually been a member? Because I just have known your name for like years, or like,
I guess it's
is it
been
from IFTWA?
about 3 or 4 years. I have actually, had been a travel writer, but never. I always had a day job, and so travel writing was kind of a part-time gig for me. But I retired from my full-time job and started doing more travel writing, and then the pandemic hit, and a friend of mine told me about IFTWA, and so I
Okay,
decided
great.
to join. And so we were doing, at that time, no one was traveling, so we were basically writing about previous trips for the magazine and different publications. And so it was an opportunity to get to know people in IFTWA and to, gave me another outlet for, the things that I was writing, and a network of some pretty interesting people. I'm always amazed when I go on IFTA trips or travel with other groups, other people on press trips, how interesting at the lives of people who are travel writers really
Yeah.
is. I think my friends think I've gone a lot of places, but I come back from my trips and say, hey, I just met somebody who's been to 60 countries.
I'm jealous. I want to go to all
Yes,
of them, and I want those experiences plus my own. Yeah, it's like
exactly.
I always talk to travel writers. I'm like, I'm jealous of you in Morocco, but it's not a green with envy, evil jealousy. It's just like, dang, the bucket list must be filled. You must do it, the wish list or whatever you want to call it, right? You've got to keep
Right.
going for it. So, where's your next destination on a wish list, and where's the next real destination that you're going to?
Boy, I'm still kind of in the working on that. I have not done that much travel in Eastern Europe. And so I would
Oh,
like to go to Hungary, Poland, the Baltics. So I think those are kind of at the top of my list. Scandinavia is another area that I'm really interested in. I have relatives in Norway, and so my one of my sisters has been to visit them, and I thought, gosh, I need to
yeah.
do that. So there are other places in the world I would like to go, and so I'm kind of working on my 2024 itinerary as we speak.
Well, I love that you're bringing that up because I think there's so much family history travel that's happening now that we didn't really realize about like 5 years ago, even
Mm-hmm.
5, 10 years
Mm-hmm.
ago. So many people are traveling to where their ancestors come from because we're all spread around the world. We're all
Mm-hmm.
over the place now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to go back in history and find who we are in a way and just even be in the same footstep as someone is amazing.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. One of my other relatives was from Ireland, and having been able to go to Ireland several years ago and to some of the places where the
Oh,
family
wow.
lived was, was fascinating. I think
It's
that's.
meaningful. There's a
Hmm.
feeling to it, you know. And some places you go to, you just get a weird feeling anyway. And you always go, what was that? Like there's this vibe you get. And then one day later, you'll like, not one day later, but like years later, you'll be finding something you like, oh, my relatives were there. That's weird. It's weird. It's happened to us. It's weird. It's trippy
Uh-huh.
weird, but it's good stuff, you know. But hey, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show. I haven't seen you around social media. It's so good to finally meet you, and I'm so glad that you're here. And everyone, follow Barbara Redding on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and barbararedding.com. And again, her article is up on blendradioandtv.com and in the show notes. So stay tuned for that. And it'll be in our magazine, our big weekly blend magazine, too. So I think we're going to have to do a special like North Africa, Middle East magazine because we have so much content on
Uh-huh.
this now. I
Yeah,
think we're going to have to
it's an
do something
interesting,
special.
an interesting part of the world. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I've really enjoyed talking to you about Morocco and some of our shared life experiences as travelers too.
Well, cheers. Here's to mint tea. You can't see my cup, but yeah, cheers to tea.
I think I'm going to have some right after this too.
Oh,
So
I
thank
have a feeling yours is going to be better than mine.
you. Well, thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFTWA, which is ifwtwa.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone!